This video is brought to you by Ground News. Today, a breakaway Georgian region considers joining Russia. Vladimir Putin secures 6 more years in office, and Niger's military junta scraps a military agreement with the United States. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Monday the 18th of March 2024. Our main story today is that politicians in South Ossetia, a breakaway Georgian region, are apparently in talks with Moscow to reintegrate the region into Russia. Yesterday, the Russian state-run news agency RIA Novosti reported that the chairman of South Ossetia's parliament, Alan Albarov, had floated the idea of holding a referendum on joining the Russian Federation. The RIA quoted Albarov saying, "We're discussing all these issues in close coordination with Russia, taking into account our bilateral relations and treaties." South Ossetia broke away from Georgia in a war from 1991 to 1992, and another war broke out in 2008, when Russian troops repelled a Georgian attempt to retake the region, after which Russia recognized it, and nearby Abkhazia, as an independent state. In fact, South Ossetia is recognized by only 5 members of the UN: Venezuela, Nicaragua, Nauru, Syria, and, of course, Russia, with all other UN member states regarding the region as sovereign territory of Georgia under Russian occupation. The region is heavily dependent on Russia. Almost all citizens have accepted Russian passports and use the Russian ruble as their form of currency. North Ossetia is already part of Russia, and as such, plans for reunification of the North and South have been proposed multiple times in the past, and with that, the full integration of the breakaway state into Russia. But attempts have so far been unsuccessful. The most recent proposal was pushed by South Ossetia's former president, Anatoly Bibliov, in 2022, calling for a referendum on integration with Russia. However, the new president, who replaced Bibliov in 2022, Alan Gagliev, has been considered as being less supportive of holding a referendum. Gagliev actually took steps 2 years ago to suspend a referendum called by his predecessor. Yesterday, however, the RIA also reported that Gagliev had in fact last year expressed that he hoped the region could be formally incorporated into Russia. Another Georgian breakaway region, Abkhazia, despite not actively pursuing reunification with Russia themselves, has supported calls for Ossetia reunification with Russia too. It's not unlikely that a new referendum may be announced in the near future. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your daily routine, or just search for us on your podcast app to listen along. Sticking with Russia-related news, Vladimir Putin has been re-elected as Russian president, with 87% of the vote, securing him another 6-year term in office, having run the country for a quarter of a century already. This further term will see him surpass Joseph Stalin to become Russia's longest-serving leader for more than 200 years. The election, unsurprisingly, was not free or fair, due to harsh censorship and the jailing of political opponents, which left Putin facing serious electoral opposition. Nevertheless, having won the election, Putin celebrated, saying, "We have many tasks ahead, but when we are consolidated, no matter who wants to intimidate us, suppress us, nobody has ever succeeded in history. They've not succeeded now, and they will not succeed ever in the future." Despite Putin's domestic popularity and his grip on power, there were Russians who took the opportunity to protest against his regime. There were incidents of fires being lit inside polling booths, and one lady poured ink into the ballot box, and others in Russia and abroad joined the Noon Against Putin protest that saw anti-Putin Russians head to the polling stations at noon in a move endorsed by opposition figure Alexei Navalny before his death. Over the weekend, Putin actually mentioned Navalny for the first time since his death in prison, calling it a sad event, and adding, "But such is life. When things like that happen, you cannot do anything about it. That's life." In other news, Niger's ruling junta has ended a military agreement with the US, just a few months after it asked French troops to leave in December. A junta spokesperson said on Saturday that the US agreement was illegal and violates all constitutional rules, and that it was profoundly unfair to Niger's people. While American troops haven't been kicked out yet, the announcement effectively ends the US's mission in Niger and widens the possibilities for closer cooperation with Russia. Since 2016, the US has used its base in Niger to monitor jihadist activity in the Sahel region, with 1,000 soldiers and civilian employees stationed in the country. It also runs 2 drone bases to monitor affiliates of the Islamist group Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. However, Niger's junta accused US officials of being condescending and said the US delegation had criticised Niger's choice of allies. Niger is one of 3 countries in the new alliance of Sahel states, which also includes junta-led Mali and Burkina Faso. The countries have distanced themselves from Western powers in recent months, expelling French troops and UN peacekeepers, as well as threatening to withdraw from ECOWAS, the regional bloc in West Africa. Meanwhile, Niger has said it's in talks with Russia to acquire military equipment in its fight against militia uprisings, which have claimed thousands of lives under the, quote, indifferent eye of much of the international community. We've got some updates now on 2 of the year's upcoming major elections, specifically India and Venezuela. In India, the government announced that the 6-week-long elections would start on April the 19th, stretching across 7 phases, with results to be announced on June the 4th. The multi-phase election is one of the world's largest democratic exercises, with around 970 million people eligible to vote. That's more than 10% of the world's population. Voters will elect all 543 seats in the Lok Sabha, India's lower house of parliament. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, the BJP, is seeking a 3rd consecutive term in office and is expected to win. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, the ruling United Socialist Party has nominated President Nicolas Maduro as its official nominee for the election set to take place on July the 28th. It comes after Venezuelan authorities disqualified Maduro's main rival, Maria Corina Machado, who overwhelmingly won an opposition primary and was seen as an electoral threat to Maduro. The opposition now faces a March the 25th deadline to choose a new challenger, although they may push ahead with Machado in the hopes that with enough pressure, the government allows her to run. If Maduro is re-elected, it will put him in charge of Venezuela's government until 2031, having already been in office since 2013 following the death of his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. And finally, in some uplifting science news, NASA has finally received a comprehensible signal from the Voyager 1 spacecraft after 4 months of what's been described as gibberish. Voyager 1 was launched back in 1977 and is now about 24.4 billion kilometers from Earth, making it the most distant human-made object ever. Anyway, since November last year, there's been issues with its onboard computers, and it's been sending a steady stream of gibberish back to Earth. But now, thanks to a command prompt by NASA scientists, a signal was received in early March that was able to be decoded. They hope, although there's no guarantee, that this data can help them devise a potential solution to the problem. With all this news around the world, it's easy to feel overwhelmed not knowing what's coming next. But lucky for you, our sponsor Ground News is your ultimate tool for easily navigating news coverage. Their app and website creates really comprehensive story overviews on any topic, so you can easily compare how news is covered across the world and political spectrum. For every article reporting on a story, you'll see the source's political bias, how factual they are, and even who owns them. For example, this story about Rishi Sunak refusing to rule out a May general election. Not only can I see that there are 7 sources reporting, I can quickly identify which sources have a political bias according to ratings from independent news monitoring organisations. What's interesting about this story is that it's mostly being covered by 4 left-leaning news outlets and only 1 right-leaning outlet. I also especially like their blind spot feed, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. For example, if you lean right, you might have missed this story about the US House of Representatives voting on a TikTok ban. It's unlike any other news app you've come across, so go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link down in the description to get 40% off unlimited access to their Vantage plan. That's only $5 a month to help an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.